11:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
Jules, this is Ryan. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well, and it's not looking good, I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So happy this time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you. And I'll see you later, Doster. Bye, babe.
What are those people going to do? All the elevators are blocked out.
In a country that most people would struggle to find on a map, in a compound that few possess the courage to enter, men from my previous life took the fight to our enemy. In that compound, they found men that pray 5 times a day for your destruction. Those men don't care about your religious beliefs. They don't care about your political opinions. They don't care if you sit on the left or the right, liberal or conservative, pacifist or warrior. They don't care how much you believe in diversity, equality, or freedom of speech. They don't care. I'm sorry you've never smelled the breath of a man who wants to kill you. I'm sorry you've never felt the alarm bells ringing in your body, the combination of fear and adrenaline as you move towards the fight instead of running from it. I'm sorry you've never heard someone cry out for help or cried out for help yourself, relying on the courage of others to bring you home. I'm sorry you've never tasted the salt from your own tears as you stand at flag-draped coffins burying men you were humbled to call your friends. I don't wish those experiences on you, but I do wish you had them. Most will never understand the sacrifice required to keep evil men like those from that distant compound away from our doorstep. But it would not hurt you to try and understand. It would not hurt you to take a moment to respect the sacrifices that others make on your behalf, whether they share your opinions or not. It would not hurt you to take a moment to think of the relentless drain on family, friends, and loved ones that are left behind, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, sometimes forever. Ideas are not protected by words. Paper and ink may outline the foundation and principles of this nation, but it is blood, only blood, that protects it. In that dusty compound, a man you have never met gave everything he had so that you have the freedom to think, speak, and act however you choose. He went there for all of us, whether you loved or hated what he stood for. He went there to preserve the opportunity and privilege to believe, to be, and to become what we want. You have the choice every day as to which category you want to be in which direction you want to move. You have that choice because the best among us, the best we ever had to offer, fought and bled and died for it. Don't ever forget that. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to SITREP. Happy Thursday evening to everybody out there on my third show of the day. Grinding away, man. How you doing? Beard brushing over there?
Yeah, I'm trying to, do what I can with this little thing on my face. Show number two of the day. I'm doing good, man.
You have a third one after this too, don't you?
I do. Then I'll be caught up with you. Then
you'll get on my level.
I'm having a great day, man. I'm having a great day.
Why? Why are you having such a great day?
I mean, I'm having a much better day than Thomas Massey.
Oh my God. I had this just for you, bro.
That is so fetch. Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
Speaking of fetch, how about Thomas Massey go fetch some more of that Jewish billionaire money?
God.
All right, I'm done.
Fully checked in on an illegitimate system. I played with it today. I said, hey, Grok, find me any evidence that this woman's claims are legitimate. Nothing. Not a single thing. Ask Perplexity, same thing. Nothing. Well, not a single thing. You are full blown in the grift, my man.
I'm glad Grok and Perplexity are not replacing your human engagement for research.
Oh, bro, I don't need to engage in this kind of shit, dude. This is so gay.
Do you know that Massey already acknowledged that he was in a relationship with her?
Yes, I understand that.
All right. I'm just saying, because,
all right,
everybody said she was lying about it. And
we've got a more epic beard than yours waiting for us in the back room. So let's get to the show. We got to talk about our sponsors first, guys. Maha Yourself with supplements that don't suck from Conscious Strength. Founded by Badlands' very own Jordan Sather in 2019, Conscious Strength products are made in America and won't break your bank, unlike other online brands. Their lineup includes collagen for strengthening joints and hair, electrolytes to get rid of those cramps, greens powders that taste good and mix easy, She Legit gummies, methylene blue, zeolite, and more. Flip the finger to Big Pharma. Be your own doctor and get supplements that you can trust from Conscious Strength. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/strength to shop now and use promo code BADLANDS to get 10% off. One more time, badlandsmedia.tv/strength. The link will be in the description down below. Also, check out episode 5 of America First Stories to learn more about Jordan and Conscious Strength. If you don't know about Jordan, he's kind of a big deal here at Badlands. We love Jordan. So yeah. And then you know what? Let's get it out of the way, man. Let's get it out of the way. Our guest doesn't know anything that's about to happen right now.
Today we remember those who gave everything. And memory is never still.
This Memorial Day! One hero, one mission! To deliver softness to America!
No, Chi-Chi, we can't stop for snacks, dude. We have to deliver all of these soft disclosure gift cards.
He goes by Zach Payne.
The motion detector!
Hey, stop fighting over the beer brush.
Life finds a way.
Hydrate your elbows! Moisturize your soul! Feel the rhythm together! Makes you feel alive and let the lotion roll! Soft disclosure, hear the cry! Maximum softness! Do or die!
Muffin, hit it.
Softdisclosure.com, promo code Memorial15. I love that fucking commercial so much.
Most epic one made so far, bro. Most epic one ever.
real talk, like when I'm sitting here on my computer, every once in a while, I'll just randomly play it. Like I'll have StreamYard Studio open, no shows going on or anything, and I'll just randomly play that ad. Like that song is fire. Like I want that song. I want it on an album. Like the 80s was the best, man. The 80s was unbelievable.
It was.
All right, guys. So we've got we had an announcement this week from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and I had an idea that we need to talk a little bit about COVID and all the things that are happening with our fellow brothers and sisters in arms, and the tragedy that's been thrust upon them over the last 6 years, going back to 2020 and the poison shots and everything. So joining us this evening, we have a retired lieutenant colonel, JAG officer, which is Judge Advocate General, which is the equivalent, the lawyers in the military. At one point, I believe he was the #1 defense senior defense counsel in the Air Force. So, guys, welcome to the show, Lieutenant Colonel Davis Younts. Colonel, do I have that right? Lieutenant Colonel, right?
That's right. You got it.
I got to make sure I'm correct there. So, how you doing, brother? Welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I apologize. I'm losing my voice a little bit, but I'll get through it, man.
Well, we will try not to expedite that. By the way, you have an absolutely epic beard. I'm totally jealous. You have consistent color. I'm graying out hardcore over here, and I don't like it. And Alpha's got a 5 o'clock.
I'm feeling like the dude that's gonna get kicked out of the 300 cast right now. Like,
yeah, I don't know what Alpha's doing. He's got to up his game, man. That's
his wife won't let him grow a long beard, so he's got to keep it short.
I feel like I should just say, like, it was out to here, and then I cut it. It was like I was like Samson, I was like Samson, and then I cut it. But nobody's gonna believe it, bro. No one's gonna believe it.
So, Davis, why don't you tell us, a little bit about your military service? This is an all-veteran podcast, so give us the rundown on your career in the Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in law school when 9/11 happened, and so that kind of derailed the plans that I had in place. And I signed up as soon as I got out. I joined the Air Force JAG Corps. I did almost 13 years of active duty. I was a prosecutor, defense counsel, senior defense counsel, deployed, and then was chief of the military justice division at the Air Force JAG School. Got out, went into the Guard. I worked full-time in the Guard for a couple of years for the Pennsylvania Guard at the Joint Force Headquarters, and then finished out my time in the reserves. My career didn't end how I wanted it to because of COVID. So I was a lieutenant colonel in the reserves, working at the JAG School, instructing new JAGs, teaching trial advocacy to the force, and the mandate came down. I had religious objections to the shot. All of my accommodations were denied, so I was facing separation from the Air Force. I was about 24 to 48 hours from getting kicked out at 19 and a half years. And then the injunction came down in the Doster case in Ohio, and that's what saved me, got me to 20 years. So I walked away right at 20 years with the reserve retirement, if you will. And that's kind of my story. I got more heavily involved in the COVID work because of my own background, as well as trying to help as many folks as I could survive the purge that was happening because of the clot shot.
Wow. So, going back historically, and you said that you were forced to take it in 2021.
Yeah, I applied for the religious accommodations and all those things. And then it was actually 2022 that all that, believe it or not, that all that was denied. And so that's where I was sitting at December 20th of 2022 was my 20-year point. And so I actually got my notice of denial on the 3rd of July, believe it or not. Right before the holiday weekend, I got my denial. So they gave me 5 days to get the shot. I said no. I went into non-compliance, and I was waiting for the hammer to drop when the injunction came down in the Doster case.
Wow. I want to play this to start off here. So there's this a movie coming out here called Duty to Disobey, and I want to play this trailer, and I think that'll probably help. That'll get this conversation rolling here. And there's going to be a lot of familiar faces for people that have watched SITREP throughout the years. We've had a lot of these individuals on the show over time. So here it is. This is the trailer here for Duty to Disobey.
I had a battalion commander come to me and she said, "Dear God, we're killing our own soldiers."
We gathered today to honor the incredible service members.
We owe you our thanks. We owe you our respect. And we owe you our freedom.
Just as we have gathered before to remember those who served, those who fought, and those who gave their last full measure of devotion for our country.
According to the Associated Press, the Pentagon is going to require vaccines for all service members.
I'm asking the Defense Department to look into how and when they will add COVID-19 to the list of vaccinations the armed forces must get.
The military was ordering service members to take a shot that they could not lawfully order them to take.
Are you choosing to be non-compliant?
Leaders did everything legal or illegal within their power to coerce and influence their service members to get the shot.
I'll never forget, I received a phone call from a mother whose son was a Marine at 29 Palms, and she told me her son and 9 other Marines were being held in confinement in the brig until they got vaccinated.
If you don't do what they tell you to do, they will ostracize you. They will destroy your life.
Stop resisting or you will get tased.
They threatened me with Leavenworth imprisonment. They banned me from all Army Public Health Center facilities for 413 days.
I counted over 140 days where I was put into isolation.
Once it becomes normalized in the military, it often very quickly finds its way into the civilian population, as we saw with the COVID mandate.
The effects extend well beyond just those in uniform, and the impact is really on the entire nation.
8,000 well-trained men and women were fired.
I lost my income. I lost my ability to feed my family.
I mean, I'm being told you're getting dishonorably discharged.
And if you get dishonorable, you lose everything. You can't get certain jobs as a civilian. It follows you for life.
You cannot mandate an experimental medical product. You cannot mandate that on military members.
In my entire medical career prior to this, I had never seen a young person with a stroke. I had never seen someone have a massive clot without provocation.
We were in great shape. We were doing very well. But then as soon after the vax is when my health went downhill.
When people celebrate all the freedoms that the military gets to grant in this country, when the military's freedoms and really the country's freedoms are actually being taken away.
Why was the vaccine mandate unlawful? How come the Secretary of War is telling us that the vaccine mandate was unlawful?
We all know that the previous administration issued unlawful orders on mandatory vaccines on an experimental vaccine, COVID-19. You know it, we know it.
You are taught that you have a duty to disobey unlawful orders.
You know, they postulated that we're going to have back pay for members that were kicked out. They're inviting these warriors back into service.
And that was huge. And I was so happy to hear that. But that does nothing for the institution itself.
What I have understood from people in the military is that it has not been made easy and that it really still needs to be done on an individual basis.
We haven't stopped in 4 years when everybody was ignoring us, and we're not going to stop for another 4, 14, or 40 years.
We are at a critical juncture, and the soul of this nation is at stake.
When we talk about orders that are unlawful, now there is a duty to disobey.
That is a lot to take in, man. And I'll tell you right now, that video where they're standing outside of the either the barracks room, it looked like it was probably in the brig, and they're getting ready to go in there. Are you refusing to comply? When I see that, I'm fucking blown away, man. I'm blown away that anybody would even do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think this documentary is so important, and all of it. That there's a comment in there about accountability and not stopping. That's so important. There's so many lessons that we need to learn as a nation, and that the military needs to learn from this. I mean, and that movie, that trailer is just tip of the iceberg. I mean, I got publicly involved in this fight and started doing media on this fight when I was still in, because there's a group of Navy SEALs. I mean, just conceptually, right? Navy SEALs on the East Coast, there were 30 of them. They were told on a Tuesday, if you don't get the shot tomorrow, we're throwing you all in the brig. That was a lie. It was a bluff. But that kind of coercion, that kind of language, what military members went through. I mean, part of the point of this movie is to tell those stories, but there is story after story that people don't even want to acknowledge as true. People don't believe happened. And so that's part of this, and part of the desire of so many of us, so many of my clients, people I represented, is just for accountability to continue when it comes to looking at what happened, so we can understand it, because it doesn't have to happen again. But unfortunately, until we deal with it, that's the real risk for our military members, is that, the very people, all of us that swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution, will have our most basic rights denied. And really, a nation, an administration, a presidential administration just decided they were going to ignore the Constitution, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and federal law that prohibited experimenting on military members. And they decided to do it anyway. It doesn't really matter why. We just have to start with that premise of understanding that's what they did.
Good, Alpha.
I was to say, I'm glad it's coming out. I'm glad it's coming out now, around the corner, because, so much has happened in our world, but specifically in our country. Like, we've been flooded with news and events that it seems like this was a long time ago, but it wasn't.
Right.
Like, this wasn't a long time ago. And the reality is it's still not technically over for a lot of people who are still battling these things, as far as their discharge codes, their health. Like, we've had vets on here that their lives change, even if they want to come back. They're not physically in a condition to where they safely can. And something I haven't heard a whole lot of people talking about, and it's always been a concern for me, is how many people in the military that did take this and suffered an injury and are concealing that injury because they don't want to be pushed out, because it's their livelihood. And what does that look like for military readiness? Like, this is something I haven't heard any big names really address when it comes to our government.
Yeah, it feels like it's a slow leak, like it's a slow drip of information about the harm that was caused by these shots, and even just the low level cardiac issues. There's really no such thing as a low level cardiac issue when we talk about a healthy population and healthy adults. But yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects of this and the way it was handled that are devastating. But here's the problem too. I represent many clients who were injured by this vaccine, so-called vaccine. And guess what? You ready for a shock? The military and the VA don't want to acknowledge the shot as any even possible source of harm to military members. So one of the things that people are challenged, I was talking to a client today who was injured by this. It's clear in the records he was injured by this, and the VA doesn't even want to acknowledge it. So you have those that are still in, that are suffering from this quietly, that are dealing with heart issues, autoimmune issues, and other things. It's impacting readiness. They don't want to talk about it because they don't want to get kicked out. But then you have people that are out, that have had heart attacks, that have had other things happen, and now they can't get a medical retirement. They can't get full access. They can't get full recognition from the VA for what's happened to them. So that's just, I mean, again, this is going to take a long time to undo, but it's not all that different than what happened with anthrax, right? There was a real problem with the anthrax vaccine that was unlawfully imposed on military members, and a lot of guys, thousands and thousands of guys, were severely injured. And whether it was the vaccine itself or a bad batch, they're still trying to unpack that. But we haven't even, I mean, that's the 90s. We're going back to the 90s, and we still haven't fixed everything for those guys.
Just real quick, Davis, refresh my memory. And again, this was, 5 or 6 years ago now. And I'm just trying to remember the mandate on the military came out before any of the mandates to the general public, correct?
Really at the same time. So what the Biden administration tried to do was implement all of this when there was FDA approval. The problem is the formula, the product that was approved by the FDA was never produced in the United States because they had a stockpile of the experimental emergency use product. So the military tried to wait until the FDA approval came out of that formula. And that's when the Biden administration tried to implement all of this. So the military was one of the first, sort of shoes to fall as it was rolled out.
Yeah. The reason I asked that is because, historically the the military is generally kind of like a test bed, so to speak, for a lot of this stuff, and I can remember when I was in the Marine Corps before we deployed to Afghanistan, on both deployments, we had to take, these medicines, these medications. I don't want to call them medicines, these pills before we deployed. And it was all under the ground of the basis that you don't want to get malaria while you're over there and mosquitoes and all this. And, I remember, let me go to the end of the story first. And I never saw a single mosquito the entire time I was in Afghanistan. Not one mosquito, not one. But now going back to when I was taking these pills, the first deployment that I went on, and I can't remember which pill I was taking, but I mean, I was waking up in the middle of the night having like terrible dreams, horrific dreams. I got on the phone at one point, with somebody, and they asked for my home address back in Florida. And I couldn't remember the address that I'd lived at for 8 years. And I had to give the phone off to my wife and be like, here, tell them the address. I started freaking out.
Wow.
And like, so all of this stuff, and all of this was to prevent malaria in a country that we had no mosquitoes. We didn't have a single problem with it. And so that's why I was kind of getting at this with the the military. Did they predate the general population beforehand? Because we are guinea pigs, essentially. We've signed our life away. We signed on the dotted line, to give our lives for the Constitution in defense of our nation, but nobody signed up for this. Nobody signed up for an experimental, to be a pincushion for an experimental jab that, only impacts the population that it impacts is so small. You had to get tested just to know that you had it because you could be asymptomatic. And, they were always saying, well, the elderly are most at risk. Well, guess what? The military is not. It's not old. It's also not fat. It's also not nasty. We're all the top, in tippy top shape, all of us. It was mind blowing, man.
Well,
unbelievable what they do to the military.
You don't even have to go as far as back as our deployments. Just go look at the reception process. You guys remember, you know what I mean? You show up to boot camp, it's a sleep deprivation phase, right? So yeah, argue informed consent when you're purposely being put through sleep deprivation. You're signing papers that you're just like, yeah, you're like, you're on the nod, right? And then you just go through and it's, it's 2 in this arm, 2 in this arm, 2 in these cheeks, 2 in these cheeks. And who remembers what they got? And like you said, they experimented on us. We did have mosquitoes out in Iraq. We did. But the same thing, that malaria sequence they gave for us, it was 2 in the morning, it was 2 at night. And then all of a sudden out of the blues, it's like, oh, you don't have to take them no more. It's like, well, the mosquitoes are still around, and here's the thing. And, this made headlines back then too, is it's still not in our SRBs what it was.
Yeah, that's true.
We still don't know. And so now you look at something like that didn't have, the world watching like it did with these, I call them bioweapons. That's my opinion. That was forced upon people. It just, I don't even know where to start because the problem's so big and out of control. And it's like you said, you have people out that are dealing with injuries. You have people in that, some are acknowledging it, some aren't. You have the VA. It's like the entire thing, like to use Trump's words, it's all discombobulated.
Right.
So let me ask this, Davis. In your opinion, what do you think was the motivation behind mandating this for the military? Like, why do you think they did this? The military we were not, the people that were susceptible to any type of complications from COVID.
Yeah. So you have to just try to analyze this logically, right? We have to we use ration, we use reason, and you're exactly right. And that's finally what I came to is I was like, because listen, I mean, again, the stories I could tell you, but like I had a client, absolutely true story. My client filed for a medical exemption to the vaccine because one of the warnings for the vaccine is if you have had an anaphylactic or an adverse reaction to 2 different categories of antibiotics, right? So take vaccination out of the side of it. If you're someone who has a poor reaction to antibiotics, there's a black box label warning on this bioweapon, right? Don't take it. So my client had a twin brother and had a sister. His sister goes first and gets the vaccine. She collapses in the parking lot outside of the pharmacy, has to be rushed to the hospital. His brother, his twin brother, goes and gets the shot, also has to be hospitalized. So my client, very smart guy, highly educated, a scientist, is like, okay, I can't get this. So he goes to a very experienced doctor, nationally known for understanding allergies, writes up a clear exemption through this doctor. It's put in his records. He puts it in his military records. He talks to a captain, an Air Force captain doctor, who says, if I were you, I wouldn't take this shot, but I have to deny your medical exemption because I'm being told I have to deny your medical exemption. So we appealed it. We had an email in writing from an Air Force colonel, supposedly a doctor, who said, we're denying your medical exemption, but I would recommend that you get yourself admitted inpatient in a hospital before you take this shot so that if you do have an adverse reaction, they can treat you immediately. So I say that to say this wasn't just about, religious freedom. This wasn't just about mandating an experimental product. There was something where the military said, we want 100% compliance no matter what. And if we don't have 100% compliance, we want those people out. So there's a lot of different things we could look at. Is it the pharmaceutical industry? Was it a money grab? Is there something we still don't fully know about what was in this vaccine or the lab leak that caused this virus? There's something we don't know yet that hasn't come out because the requirement was no matter what, it has to be 100% compliance.
Or did they want to create a military that's willing to just go along to get along and, doesn't have a single shred of independent thought? And this isn't to knock the people that got it, because there are a lot of people that objected to it, but we're probably, and to be totally honest, if I was in the Marine Corps when this came out, I probably would have been kicking and screaming, but I probably would have got it. I'm not going to lie. I probably would have got it. So it's not every single person that got it that is, a mindless zombie that's just like, whatever you tell me to do, a yes man. But when you see the Slotkin and Mark Kelly and, disobey unlawful orders thing come along, a lot of the staff NCOs now are people that were taking that shot in 2021, 2022, and are, now people that are, kind of in line with that whole thought process. So now again, I'm totally speculating on why this was, forced on people and why, if you didn't get it, you were automatically kicked out. But to me, that's kind of something that you need to pay attention to, is that we now have a military that is full of people that were mindless drones that went along with what the Biden administration told them to do in 2022.
Right. And this really was a constitutional crisis. And what I mean when I say that is the Biden administration chose to ignore the law. They chose to ignore the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and they chose to ignore federal law that says you cannot experiment on military members. They knew what the law was. It's clear if you look at the memorandums that went around and all that, they knew what they were doing. And they said, we're going to do this anyway. So the executive, right, the commander in chief was intentionally violating the law and really challenging the constitutional system. And it took courts to step in to stop it. Right. And so that really is a critical question, because now we have a military. And again, I don't blame most people that made the decision to get this. I blame a lot of senior leaders that when they were showed the truth, chose not to stand up to this. I blame a lot of JAGs who knew the truth, who knew the law, who understood what the right thing to do was, and chose their pension, their careers, their reputation over doing what was right. I do have a problem with a lot of them, but ultimately now you have a military that is filled with people who said, okay, I get that this is an unlawful order. I get what they're doing is wrong, but I don't want to put my career at risk. My pension or whatever it is more important to me than the Constitution or the truth. And in that respect, you could argue it was a test and many people failed it.
Well, and the part that is concerning is that crossed over into the first responder world. This happened in police agencies, sheriff's departments. You know, these are the people that are supposed to take that position of it's unlawful, I'm not doing it. And people's retirements got weaponized against them.
Oh, they absolutely did. And yeah, I mean, there's so many lessons to learn from that, but you're right. And then it begs the question, if people are willing to go along with this, if military members are willing to look at this, to know that it was unlawful, and to still not just, order people to comply, but sit on a discharge board and go along with recommending that someone be separated over this, that's a real problem, because then you have to ask the question, and that's where examples are talking about things like Mark Kelly has said, it starts to raise that question of what else would they go along with? What else would they be willing to do if they're told, just do it anyway, just go along, this is what we're doing? That really is problematic when we start to think about the broader implications for our nation and what that means for our military.
Davis, I want to play real quick. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth came out and had a new message this week, and I want to play this message in full and then talk about this here.
Joe Biden's mandate to force military service members to take the COVID-19 vaccine was wrongfully and unlawfully applied because the Biden Pentagon refused to grant exemptions for certain medical and faith reasons, not to mention it was an experimental vaccine. As a result, many service members and their families suffered severe hardship, and the department lost trust with the American people. President Trump's executive order on this topic stated that the military unjustly discharged those who refused the vaccine, regardless of their conscience or the years of service given to our nation. He called this what it is, an unfair, overly broad, and completely unnecessary burden on our warriors. Under the leadership of President Trump, the War Department is committed to doing everything we can to make it right, as you know. We want warriors of conscience, warriors who made a principled stand for truth. We want them back in our ranks as soon as possible. We are welcoming back to service patriots who refused the COVID-19 vaccine and were discharged for that reason. If that is you, and you still have the desire to once again wear the cloth of our nation, we are ready to reinstate you with back pay and with benefits. I'm directing the Undersecretary of War for Personnel and Readiness to establish a Department of War COVID-19 Reinstatement and Reconciliation Task Force. The services have them right now. We're establishing one at our level to oversee the entire thing. The task force's goal is to bring back into service all those who desire to continue to serve our country in uniform. Even if you do not intend to return to service, the War Department will provide a path for resolution of unearned bonuses, upgrades to discharge characterizations that will unlock your well-deserved benefits, and removal of adverse documents from service files. Further, I have directed a review of policies and decision-making to ensure that we do not go down this path again. You raised your right hand and swore an oath to serve and protect the Constitution and our nation. You were mistreated by the Biden Pentagon, and we are fixing that injustice.
So, Davis, your thoughts on that and how that differs from what we've been told about the individual branches going through and doing much of the same?
Yeah, there's a couple pieces that are absolutely critical. First, the messaging in my mind is really, really important, because Secretary Hegseth is talking about the medical piece, the religious freedom piece, and the experimental piece. So he is going against the guidance he's getting and the advice he is getting from the attorneys at the Pentagon, the bureaucrats at the Pentagon, and he's willing to talk about this being an unlawful order. That's really, really important when it comes to trying to make things right for so many veterans. But the other piece is the services. And again, I mean, 32,000 people work at the Pentagon on any given day, and most of them are part of the permanent or semi-permanent bureaucracy, and many of them are opposed to what he's trying to do to make this right. They were the people that were implementing it in the first place. So all of that matters. And again, the Army has done the best job in many respects of bringing people back in. The Air Force has been terrible. The other services have been far behind the Army. So Tata, the Undersecretary for Manpower or for Personnel and Readiness is Undersecretary Tata. He has done a good job. His messaging has been on point. He's been working this hard, but they've been having to wait for the service secretaries to get on board and get this done at the service level. And it's way too slow. So I think you can see some frustration and some dissatisfaction. So I think this is really, really good news. It still has to be implemented. The services have been pushing back. I hear it all the time. There's other guidance that he's pushed out, and I hear the services say, well, we haven't seen a policy memo on that. I'm like, here's the policy memo from the Secretary of Defense. Oh, okay, well, we haven't seen the implementing guidance yet. And I'm like, this is the implementing guidance. It's simple, it's clear, let's move forward. But just like we saw during COVID, there's this bureaucratic pushback. And I hope the American people can see that. I think we really need to have conversations about the power of the bureaucracy. People put the military on a pedestal sometimes, and they should. Individual service members that are willing to sacrifice should be given credit for that. But the bureaucracy, the Department of War has become this bloated federal agency like so many other agencies, and we got to fix that. So not only I think is this so important for so many people that were hurt by the COVID mandate, but I think there's a larger lesson we need to learn here.
When you start to see the conversations and the indictments coming out, surrounding one of Fauci's senior guys, and at least the hint towards the direction that this can potentially go, is this something that you see accelerates the conclusions to a lot of the fights that you have for your clients, or is that something that's gonna probably maybe slow it down as you guys try to figure out what direction this is going?
Well, I think it's going to help. And again, it's one of those things where there's the law, but then there's also willpower, right? And public sentiment. So what I've seen throughout this fight is there were some, like Senator Ron Johnson and others, that have been on the forefront of trying to bring this to people's attention and talking about it. Others have been way behind and have only wanted to get involved when public pressure was there. So every time there's an indictment, every time we see in the news a discussion of, individuals that are supposed to work for the American people as part of an administration that were lying, that were being deceptive, that were acting in self-interest, that were burying data. Every time that comes out, I think that helps. I think that gives us momentum. And it also gives so many of these bureaucrats that are making these decisions, that sit on discharge review boards or board of corrections, they're insulated, right? They live inside the Beltway in DC. They've been part of the government for way too long. And they don't really think about the impact on real people, on real individuals anymore. And so every time we see these things, I hope it starts to wake people up and gives people within the system either the courage to do the right thing or fear that they themselves may be held accountable for being complicit in these lies.
Well, that's the key word right there, is accountable. And I want people held accountable. And I love what Secretary Hegseth is doing here. I'm a huge proponent of it. I think it took too long, to be honest with you. And to what you had said earlier about the individual services not quite being up to speed with what the Secretary of War wants, like, it's the military, man. Like, when people aren't up to speed, you light a fire under their ass and you get them up to speed. Like, it's not civilian business infrastructure. This is the military. We have ways of making guys do what we need them to get done. And Hegseth should know this better than anybody, being, a grunt himself. When you look at, and you have a better pulse on this, thumb on the pulse of this than we would, but when you look broadly at all the people that are involved in this fight and everything else, what would you say the percentages, or a spitball percentage of people that you think would actually want to come back in if they were afforded that opportunity?
5% maybe.
Wow. Is that because of time, or is that just a total distrust of the service now?
Unfortunately, a lot of it is a distrust. I mean, listen, and I can be even more specific. I can't say names, but three of my clients that survived COVID, they were able to stay in and continue serving. Three of them that I can think of in particular were Navy SEALs, tip of the spear guys. They stayed in, they survived barely, but they survived everything that happened with COVID. They got back spun up, they deployed again, they went operational. But the moment they could leave, meaning they'd done their service time, that they'd done a deployment, they did what they needed to do, even though they were getting closer to retirement, they walked out. They walked out, 3 within the last couple of months. And the reason is they don't trust the system, right? These are the guys that were threatened with court-martial. These were the guys that were treated, Navy SEALs that were treated like trash for 2 years while this was going on. And yes, they wanted to stay. Yes, they wanted to deploy with their teams. Yes, they wanted to do the job. But as soon as they could walk away honorably, and even though they were getting close to retirement, that's what they did. They walked away from it because they don't want to be part of a system they can't trust anymore because they saw what happened. And again, a lot of these people like what President Trump is trying to do. They like what Secretary Hegseth is trying to do, but they don't trust the system and they see the bureaucracy as having failed them. And that's why they're walking away. So it's a very low percentage of people that I speak to that even if they had the opportunity with back pay and other things, that would be willing to subject themselves and their families to what happened during COVID. Because it's not just about getting kicked out. It's the way people were treated. Sometimes for 2 years, isolation, if you were on a ship, not being able to get off a ship in port, being locked in rooms, not being able to go to church, being confined to base. I mean, all of these things are things that happened that our military did to these men and women. And it was terrible. I mean, I had clients that were homeless. They were kicked out with less than 24 hours notice on the street, had to live in their cars and then beg, to find people to take them in until they could get back on their feet because of this. So that's kind of the moral injury that's still happening. And that's why I say it's such a low percentage. So I appreciate the effort, but I'm not convinced that many people that didn't go through it or didn't want to acknowledge what was happening to so many service members as this was going on, I'm not sure they fully grasped how difficult and challenging this was for so many.
Do you think Hegseth went far enough with that announcement, with the things that he's giving in return?
I think we're getting much closer. He's starting to acknowledge the fact that there is a huge population of people that were forced out, not necessarily involuntarily discharged because of not getting the shot, but were forced out during that time period because of other things that happened to them. Getting their records right, getting their back pay, getting their bonuses, making them whole, I think will do a lot. And then they will become ambassadors for others, for their own children or family members to want to serve again. I'm really eager to see what this task force is going to do and what the guidance is going to be from this task force. Because I will tell you, I've sat in the Pentagon meeting with some of these senior leaders, having conversations with them, and they're always like, yeah, but I don't know if we can do that legally, or I don't know this, or I don't know that. So I can tell you there are still, even though Hegseth came in and fired all the senior JAGs from each branch of the service, which needed to be done, there are still civilian attorneys, general counsel's office, and things like that within the Pentagon, as well as many JAGs that are pushing back against the implementation of this at every turn. And that is a huge challenge. And that's something that you just, unless you've been to the Pentagon, you understand how it works. It is extremely difficult to fight through all of that bureaucracy, even with the best intentions. And it takes time. And my fear is if we don't stay very aggressive on this, they're just going to run out the clock. And if there's a different administration in with a different Secretary of War, then this is probably just going to get swept under the rug.
Yeah, that's one of my fears as well, is a lot of what we're seeing is kicking the can down the road until the administration checks out, and there's no accountability ever. And we're talking now, and I'm glad we're getting squared away with the civil side of this and getting our service members made right and everything. But I still want accountability. We don't have any accountability for any of this stuff. Did you watch the hearing yesterday with James Erdman?
I just saw some highlights. I didn't have a chance to watch it all.
Yeah. So, I'm watching that thing, and again, nothing that, if you've been down the, you know, the rabbit hole that is COVID, nothing that was like crazy new. But as you know, Erdman's talking about this directors initiative group, the dig, and you know, the investigation that they were doing into COVID, and you know, how it was handled under the previous administration. He's sitting there saying, as a CIA agent, you know, an officer with the CIA, he's sitting there saying the CIA is spying on these individuals, and they're monitoring what the president has ordered them to do. The CIA is monitoring DNI officials, a superior branch of the bureaucracy to the CIA. And you know, and so again, and I know this is kind of a broad way to go back to the military. We don't have any accountability. We don't have accountability for, you know, what Lloyd Austin did. We don't have accountability for what's the general that Colonel Long has talked about, the one that says, you guys got to make sure you go out there and get vaccinated. And then he gets vaccinated and his trigger finger locks up on him. Do you know what story I'm talking about?
Yes.
I can't remember the guy's name, but she told that story when I was in Alabama for an event that she was at. And I was blown away by it. I'm like, dude, you were injured by the vaccine and you're telling people to get this vaccine. That's crazy. That's nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that accountability piece, right? That accountability piece is so difficult because you'll talk to people and they'll say, okay, well, how do we hold people accountable? Again, firing the JAGs, firing the senior JAGs for each branch of the service, having them resign, that was a great start. There's been some others, but you know, the Biden administration fired a lot more senior officers and generals than this administration has. And I think part of that is, and this sounds like a dumb way to say it, but sometimes I think that there are good people that are motivated by doing the right things and actually care about other people, and they're hesitant to fire some of the people they should because they're trying to be good people. And sometimes we just need to come in and clean house. And that's really what needs to happen, because there's this bureaucratic mindset. And I have this conversation with military, especially young, you know, junior officers that I speak to. I said, you're going to learn, as you start to learn this job, as you start to learn how to be a leader in the military, you're going to learn that the military today, at least in the last few years, has done a really bad job of teaching anything about leadership except risk management. That being risk averse is the primary leadership tool we're teaching people. And unfortunately, the lessons that's been learned by far too many military officers is the risk you're supposed to mitigate is your own career. And we should have seen this coming. I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2015 or 16, the Army War College did a study. You can go look it up. Actually had dinner with one of the PhDs that did the study, but they did this study on Army officers. It was limited to Army officers because there was a concern that there was an integrity problem. Because here's the deal. You guys know all of the mandatory, especially the computer-based mandatory training we have to do in the military, right? Well, these guys did a study and they proved that there was a time at which there was not really enough man hours in a year to accomplish all the training that the Army was requiring, right? Like you just couldn't do it all. It's not possible. Yet 100% of Army officers were signing off that they had completed the training and that they had done the training. So there was this mentality that more important telling the truth was checking all the right boxes off on an inspection and making sure you were green, even if you had to fudge the numbers to do it. And that may seem like a small thing, but it showed kind of an integrity issue. So then fast forward to COVID, and you have those same officers that are like, well, I have questions about the legality of this. I see the things that are being said. I have concerns, but I don't want to put my command position at risk. I don't want to put my next assignment at risk. I don't want to be seen as someone who's going to cause problems. So I'm just going to check the box and order everybody to get this shot no matter what.
The accountability thing and being afraid, you know, to speak up. You know, I go back and I know this is unrelated to COVID, but you know, when with the Abbey Gate thing, one of the people that's always stuck out to me is Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller.
Absolutely.
And he was actually Alpha. I think he was either our first or second show on SITREP was our interview with him. So 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, whatever it was, our first interview. I was going back trying to find the interview we did with my corpsman, and I went all the way back to the beginning and worked my way up. But you know what he did, you know, in as a lieutenant colonel in uniform, and calling out, you know, the dereliction, the inadequacies of our top brass. At what point in the military do you think people become essentially yes men, politicians, you know, politicians in camo, essentially? And so at what point do you think that, and do you think at what rank I should say, do you think that begins? And do you think there were people that were, you know, general officers and you know, colonels and above that, you know, conscientiously objected to this, but would not voice that opinion?
You know, I think it becomes it becomes such an interesting question, because I don't know that there's a specific set rank, right? Courage doesn't necessarily know rank. And so it's a moving target. But I think that there's a tendency, the closer people get to 20 years, right? Just put that as a number. The closer people get to securing that pension, I think the more concerned they become about, you know, stirring things up. The other piece that happens is people think, the mindset is they justify it. They say, well, if I can just get this promotion, think of all the good I can do as a colonel. Think of all the good I can do as a general officer. Think of all the things I'll be able to accomplish if I just get that power. And then they get that power and they start thinking about the next piece. So that's the real challenge. That's the real question of moral courage. But, you know, what Stu Scheller did was in the vein of what Billy Mitchell did back, you know, in the World War I, World War II era. And when we were talking about air power and he was trying to demonstrate how important it was, he was court-martialed because he was willing to be outspoken, because he realized the danger that our nation faced if we didn't try to understand air power. And those are the same kinds of things that happen. So what's fascinating is we look back at people like that historically, and we see why they did what they did. They see the good they were trying to do, and we acknowledge them as heroes. Not always, but we often acknowledge them as heroes. But in the moment, there's terrible persecution. I mean, that's what Stu faced. He faced court-martial. He faced brig time for what he did, and now he's in a position to make a difference. So praise God for that. But it's a difficult question. What we need to do, what we need to emphasize is we need to find a way to start rewarding individuals in the military that are willing to stand up, that are willing to make a difference. Because here's one of my other fears, and I know that warfare has changed a lot, but go back to World War II, right? This is basic common sense. One of the significant differences between the American military and the German army and European armies, and where we were successful and they weren't, was the rigid bureaucracy and the hierarchy of the structure. We put an emphasis on NCOs, platoon leaders, junior officers that had the authority for taking the initiative and making decisions on their own. They didn't have to wait to wake up Hitler to get approval to do these things. And it was reflected in how things worked. You could even read, you know, German officers famously were quoted as saying, it's very difficult to go to war against the Americans because we can study their doctrine, but it's apparent to us that they don't study their own doctrine. Right? In other words, we rewarded officers, we rewarded NCOs that showed initiative and were willing to think on their feet and be flexible, and were more concerned about winning a specific battle, doing the right thing in the moment, than following a strict order or waiting for orders. We've gotten away from that, right? We've gotten so risk averse. We've somehow lost a lot of that spirit. Now it's still there in some portions of the military, but that's what we need to emphasize. We need to find ways to reward initiative, outspokenness, creativity, rather than just promoting bureaucrats.
And it's a critical time in the military as well, because we're on the heels of this atrocity that happened to our service members with the bioweapon. But at the same time, you can see that the American people still had hope in what is Donald Trump, because our recruiting numbers were out the freaking roof. So it's telling you that the American people see you as a solution. If you don't fulfill that solution, which is accountability, do we ever get these kind of recruiting numbers again? Because they're going to be like, you told us, we trusted you, we came in the numbers you needed, but you didn't fulfill your obligation. That obligation is hands down accountability.
Yeah, and that's one of my fears, because we have a window and it's closing rapidly to seek out this accountability. And if we don't do it and we don't do it well, I do think we burn a lot of bridges and we lose a lot of that trust. Because people have a lot of faith in Trump. They have a lot of faith in Hegseth. They have a lot of faith in some of these other leaders to do the right thing, but accountability has to be part of that.
Yeah, I read Hegseth's book. What is it? The War Against Warfighters.
War on Warriors, I think, something like that.
War on Warriors. Yeah, I read that book. And before, when President Trump had first nominated him, I was kind of like, okay, I kind of like the idea of a non-general officer being appointed to the Secretary of War or Defense, Department of Defense at that time. I kind of like that idea. Somebody that's been on the ground. You know, I've subscribed to Colonel Scheller's, junior officers and enlisted Marines were winning battle after battle after battle in Afghanistan, and we never made any progress. We never won the war. And that is a failure from the top. That is not a failure from the junior enlisted, the junior officers. We were kicking ass and taking names. You guys were the ones that weren't doing the job. Whether or not that was deliberate, we can have that conversation. But that was kind of my mindset in Hegseth is this is fresh air. This is a fresh breath into the Department of Defense, somebody that has more of the ground level perspective rather than the bureaucratic perspective. And I was really excited about that. Then I read the book, The War on the Warfighter, and I was like I was all in on him. I was like, This is great. And so far it's been impressive. And I do want to get into, Hegseth's performance, and we can kind of move on a little bit from the COVID thing here as we get towards a little past the halfway point. I do have to hit a sponsor though, real quick, Davis, before we do that. So let me go ahead and bring up our next sponsor for the show, Badlanders. You guys are all familiar with Loaded Gun Coffee. They've been longtime supporters here at Badlands, and you may have met them in person at some of our GART events. But did you know they are also a veteran-ran family-owned shop in Lake Havasu, Arizona? Every bag of their whole bean coffee delivers a high-octane, patriotic punch of flavor. With a long family history of commitment to freedom, every bag is a testament of pride and honor. From the skilled farmers who cultivate each blend to their roasters that handpick the finest coffee beans from around the world, Loaded Gun Coffee has mastered their unique brewing methods, resulting in the best tasting coffee around. The coffee is smooth and delicious, the perfect way to start your mornings. Get over to badlandsmedia.tv/loaded and use promo code Badlands to get 10% off your order. And if you're in the Lake Havasu area, stop in their newly renovated store and tell them Alpha and CannCon said what's up. Sent you to say what's up. Again, check them out at badlandsmedia.tv/loaded. Use promo code Badlands and stay loaded with Loaded Gun Coffee. And then also just a reminder, GART Deadwood, June 25th through the 28th. Badlands Media is heading back to Deadwood, South Dakota for the 12th stop on the Great American Restoration Tour. Whether you're attending in person or virtually, a GART veteran or a GART virgin, there is something for everyone. Early bird prices for virtual tickets are available through May 15th. Merchandise packages are also available for both in-person and virtual ticket holders. Get your GART 12 tickets today at badlandsmedia.tv/events. All right, there we go. So, Davis, in terms of Secretary Hegseth, go back to him. What would you rate so far? His performance as Secretary of War, the good, the bad, the ugly. Where are you sitting with him?
Yeah, there's a lot of good. So I'll start with the good. So much of the messaging has been good. And just the idea, the concept that you have someone who really understands the boots on the ground, really understands the operational side, and really is more loyal to those people, to the people that he served with, than to politicians in DC or any of those things. I think that's huge. The emphasis on physical fitness, on readiness, on the warfighter, as opposed to the bureaucracy of the military, I think has been really, really important. I think he's done a lot to restore pride in service, to talk about standards. Listen, you want the best people in the military, raise the standards. Whatever the standards are, raise them, right? And you'll get better people trying to achieve those standards. So he's understood that. He's done that really, really well. And he's moved, I think, in the right direction on many things. I think the bad, if there is a failure point, I think that it is the naivete in dealing with the bureaucracy. And again, I can say this, I've seen it over and over again. I see it constantly in dealing with my clients. There's this entrenched bureaucracy, and the different levels. He came out with this no more walking on eggshells policy, right? Trying to reform the way we do these investigations, because a good military leader, even at the NCO level, can get accused of one thing by a subordinate that just doesn't like being held accountable for something. And all of a sudden their career is potentially at an end because they're just being, sliced by, administrative cuts, 1,000 of them through EO investigations, IG complaints, whatever it is, right? They get these complaints against them. And the Biden administration's mentality was, we don't want to blame the victim. We don't want to blame the oppressed. So whenever anybody makes any kind of a complaint like this, we're just going to believe it. Forget innocent until proven guilty. We're just going to believe the quote unquote victim until this is resolved. And so careers are destroyed. That entrenched mentality is still there at the mid-level management throughout the military. So I see it all the time. I still represent clients who get accused of ridiculous things. They're obviously absurd, and yet their career is on hold for 6 months, for a year, trying to deal with this. And when I present to, the Army JAG, the Air Force JAG, the Navy and Marine Corps JAG, when I present to them, hey, haven't you read Secretary of War's policy memo that says this is supposed to take 30 days, that we're supposed to do a check on this, a common sense, rational check, and we're supposed to stop to these frivolous investigations? They're like, yeah, but we haven't seen the implementing guidance on that yet. Or sitting in a board and saying, hey, the official position of the Department of War is that the mandate was unlawful, so we need to get rid of this adverse action that's related to the mandate. Yeah, we haven't seen any implementing guidance on that. And we thought it was lawful at the time we did this, so it's okay. So again, I think the bad is just and I think, President Trump faced this in his first administration. He did a better job recognizing it in this second term. But this idea of how much work has to be done and how long it takes to root out the bad actors and just the inertia of the bureaucracy. And that's where I fear Hegseth is going to do a lot of good and run out of time before we get the football all the way to the end zone.
The point you're making there about one cut just completely ruins your career. This story popped into my mind, Alpha, last 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we had my buddy Danny on. I had this Marine on. He wrote a book and he was on our show a few weeks ago, and he was one of the most squared away Marines I've ever served with. This guy was locked on. He was an excellent PFTer. He was very smart. He was motivated. He was a genuine good person. And he just had the most traumatically tragic career in the military that you could ever imagine. And the last thing that ever happened to him, he got busted down to a private while we were in Afghanistan. And we were at a FOB where it was a very nice FOB compared to our first deployment, which was a shithole, right? We were out in the middle of nowhere. Second deployment, the Afghan war, it was 2012. It was kind of starting to wind down a little bit. And we had a nice chow hall. We actually had Marine Corps chefs or cooks, that were there working the chow hall. And they would ask us, the grunts, we were 03s, they would ask us to send guys to the chow hall, to work at the chow hall. And so we would send, guys that were on their off day, meaning they're not on a patrol day, to the chow hall. And one day he goes in there and there's like 2 sergeants and a corporal that are in the back playing video games or watching TV or whatever, while our lance corporals and PFCs that have been patrolling for 8 hours a day for the last, 5 days, they finally get a day off and they're going and working 4 hours at the chow hall, and they're out there busting their ass, serving food, bringing everything out. And this guy goes to the sergeant and goes, "Hey, Sergeant, why are my guys the ones that are," and he's a senior Marine, he's still a Lance Corporal, but he's a senior guy. "Why are my Marines out here doing this and not your guys in the chow hall? Who the fuck do you think you are?" That kind of thing. And this guy was looking out for his guy. That is something that is so admirable and desirable, that a senior Marine, even though he doesn't have the rank of the other guy, he's willing to go to bat for his junior guys. He gets NJP, busted back down to private, and completely ruined his career. completely ruined his career. And this guy, you know, is a guy that could have went places. And so, you know, when you think about this kind of stuff, like the point you were making right there about, you know, not walking on eggshells anymore, right? You're a grunt on a forward operating base. Everybody on that base is in support of you as an infantry Marine. They're there to support you. And he had the balls to stand up and say, why are my guys busting their ass doing your job when you're not going out there and patrolling for 8 hours a day for 5 straight days? I love what Hegseth is doing in that regard specifically right there.
Yeah, it's so important. And if you saw this week, he came out and said, hey, I want another review of the military justice process, the military legal system. So again, that's the right instinct. That's the right things that need to happen. Those are the things we need to be doing. But I'm just concerned about the timing. I really am concerned he's going to run out of time.
That time window, man. It's the time window. I mean, it's and in one aspect, it's an advantage because, you know, the president and Pete realize they're in a limited scope of time. So, you know, it's going to light a fire under them. But on the same aspect, because they don't want to cut the corners of things that exist, you know, they try to go about it the right way until ultimately get to where Pete's like, I'm just going to disregard all the shit you guys are telling me. And like, we're going to talk about this. But how much time is wasted in the interim? And that's something that's not on our side. Let me ask you this, Davis. And I like to ask this question to my guests, you know, that have thought these things out and you're vested in this fight. If Trump was to get on the horn with you right now and said, Davis, what's one thing, you name one thing that I can change right now and I'm changing it. One thing, give me one thing. What's your priority? What are you telling him?
It's hard to say one thing, right?
I know.
But what I would say is, don't be afraid to fire essentially all the general officers.
Yes.
And start over again, because there may be a couple of good ones, but there are too many general officers in the United States military. We have more admirals than we do ships. And so we need to fire the flag officers and you know, I love the idea. I know my buddy Infantry Dort and others have talked about this, but you know, Eisenhower would like to hold war games to see who could actually command. And I would love, that would be the other thing is fire the general officers and hold war games and actually see who can command in at least in a simulated battle environment. And the people that can command successfully, that's who you promote.
Well, look, Trump already showed he has the balls to make that decision because Hegseth was not a general.
Right.
Look at how many people
That's
said
right.
this dude isn't qualified. What is he doing? And Trump said, no, I recognize talent and the man for the job. This is the man for the job. He needs to just do that on the scale you're talking about.
Right.
Get rid of them. Get rid of them because there's a whole lot of people that have the ability to do what you did with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. There are guys that will step up to the plate. I think that's a solid. Do it. Get rid of them.
And this goes back to the point you guys were making earlier about, you know, look at Vietnam, look at the war on terror. It's not the junior officers and the operators in the field that have not been successful. And every turn, when they have been allowed to do the job, they've been successful every time. We beat the enemy every time, but it's the general officers, it's the leadership that fails us, that doesn't have the right strategy, doesn't have the right support, doesn't have the willpower to do what needs to be done to win. And so if we recognize that and say, look, maybe you're a good person, maybe you're a nice guy, maybe you've been a decent general, but you're part of a failed system. You're part of a losing team. It's time to rebuild.
Do you think, and this might get a little controversial here, but do you think it's really they're part of a failed system, or do you think the system is designed that way? And by that, well, hold on. By that, what I mean is you go back to when President Trump first announced his candidacy for his second term here, he said, I'm going to close the revolving door between the government and the bureaucracy. And so when you look at the military where it is today, I mean, our last Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, had to get a waiver in order to become Secretary of Defense because he was coming off a contract with Northrop Grumman. He was coming off the board of, I think it was Northrop Grumman. It was one of the defense contractors. But do you think that was all by chance that they just weren't successful, or do you think it was an effort to prolong this war to continue that military industrial complex? I mean, we just saw, and this is the one thing, you know, to the goods and pros and cons of Hegseth. He just asked for $1.5 trillion in a public, you know, AI generated video on X, and it's, to me, that's too much, man. Like, so I'll let you answer that.
I disagree with him on that.
I know you do. I know you do.
That's the authoritarian in me, man.
Right. No, listen, here's the thing. Let's just go back. Let's look at history, and we have to learn from it. Think about Eisenhower, right? Eisenhower was a general, a successful general, a good leader, became president. And what did he warn us about in his farewell address? You got to go back and read it. It's not just the military industrial complex. It was the reliance on expertise and scientists and so-called experts. What he was really warning was the rise of the bureaucracy that he was seeing. So you're absolutely right. What we have lost as a nation is this idea to really understand incentives. So one of the things we have to ask the question, it's why we have to ask the question about the COVID purge. Why do we even have to ask that question? Because we know instinctively someone's making a lot of money off of these vaccine mandates. We know instinctively there are people that make a lot of money selling munitions to the United States government. And we also know that there is a revolving door between those companies and senior leadership at the Pentagon and other administrative agencies. And we look at the amount of money involved, and it is a fair question to ask, who stands to gain from what we're doing? And why was Eisenhower, his health was failing, he was an older guy, he was just planning on going back to his farm in Pennsylvania. Why was he warning us about those things? He had zero incentive not to be truthful with the American people. And I just think we've blown past that warning. It is, I mean, anybody that hasn't read that lately, I used to keep a copy of that farewell address on my desk when I was in the military and even after I got out, because of what's in there as a warning to all of us to try to understand that. And listen, if you deployed in the military in the global war on terror, like all of us did, you have seen the amount of waste and the amount of money being made on contracts, and it blows your mind when you see it. I mean, where I was deployed, there was one specific job being done that is typically done even on large installations in the United States by 2 NCOs, usually a tech sergeant and a staff sergeant. E5 and an E6 do the job. I deployed to a tiny little installation. There were 12 contractors doing that job, 12 of them making over $200,000 a year, and 2 NCOs.
Davis, I had a guy when I got out of the Marine Corps. I was a mortarman, infantry mortarman, and I was an FDC chief. So I was the guy that plotted targets and told you like time of flight, figured out the direction and all that stuff. And my squad leader, when I got out, calls me up one day. He's like, "Hey, I got a contract with Raytheon teaching mortars to Afghan special forces. Would you be interested when I'm done? Would you be interested in picking up my contract and coming over here?" And I was like, "Well, what are the details?" It's $175,000 a year. You work 6 months out of the year. You go over there for, I think it was like a month, and then 3 months, and then you come back for like a month, and then you go back and, you know, back and forth. And it's $175,000, and I think 60 or 70,000 of it's tax free. And I was like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. Is it a lot of hard work?" He's like, "No, dude, I sit in my Connex and watch Netflix and TV all day. Literally, that's all I do." He says I might train maybe a couple hours a day, and he's making $175,000. The only reason I didn't do it is because I promised my wife I wouldn't deploy again after I got out of the Marine Corps. I was like, I'm not going to do it again.
Look at when the deployment was getting ready to come over and we had all this ammo. It was like, "Look, boys.
Oh yeah,
we can pack and mark and count, or we can go have some massive training." Right? It was just like, let's go have massive training, because ain't nobody want to do that working party. But you think about it, hindsight, we saw it as a bunch of Lance Coolies and corporals that were just going to go out there and,
blow shit up,
blow shit out, fire a lot of brass. But think about that, platoon after platoon, company after company, battalion after battalion, and think about how much money that does bring in to the military industrial complex or all these contracting groups and all that. And it's like, you see why it's allowed to happen, because the reality is, look at every other day. Like, out of all the stupid ass working parties we did, making sure that ammo we didn't spend gets back to the rear so we're not wasting money, that's actually a working party that would have made sense. But again, they gave us an option. We capitalized on that moment. So yeah. But to the point on the spending, because I don't want people to think like, oh, if it just wants trillions of dollars, going into the I just, in the right places. I mean, come on, we were Marines in Iraq with green fucking vehicles. Like, I mean, make that make sense. We still had the green mop suits. This was 03, at the very beginning of it. But we're just like you're telling me we didn't have the money to make sure that these things got painted before they got ships, onto the ship. And it's that. But the other aspect too is we pay our service members fucking pennies for what we demand of them.
Absolutely.
And when you look at, and because my afterlife was in law enforcement, Davis, and when I look at law enforcement, agencies in the regions that were plagued with corruption also match the salaries. And areas where the salaries were high, it's like what you said, you raise that bar, well, everybody wants in. So you start to get that top tier talent. You make our military to where the pay is actually attractive, and you raise that bar, you're going to get the best of the best. You're going to get people making decisions of, well, I'm going to the military because I don't have another choice because I jacked up my adolescence, to, hey, I'm not making these stupid decisions because I want to be able to get into the military. And that changes the face of our military. And that's why I'm saying that financial part, yeah, you don't have to put it on the top side. Bring it down bottom side. Put it in our equipment. Put into, our actual, training. We should have more training.
I'll let Davis respond.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the issues I have with military spending is, what are we actually spending it on? And what are we doing when it comes to training? And we saw that, there were times during GWAT that the money and resources were there, but how many stories can we all share of situations where critical life-saving type resources were not available, and yet there was billions and billions and billions of dollars being spent, and there's all this waste, and yet the warfighter's still not getting the resources they need. So that's my frustration. That's where we need the reform. And I just, listen, maybe I'm simplistic, maybe because I never served at the Pentagon, I don't understand it, but like, do we really need 32,000 people working at the Pentagon? Is that really necessary to do what needs to be done? I listen, maybe I'm wrong, but I happen to think there's a huge percentage of what we call active duty military that's just the bureaucracy and support that we could cut and actually get resources to the war fighters, actually raise that standard, and we would be much better off. But we have just grown it and grown it and grown it to where we have, people. And look, I'm the Air Force guy, right? It's barely military sometimes in the Air Force, depending on what your job is, to be honest. And I was a JAG, but there's so much waste, and there really is a question of where are those resources going? And again, the problem is most guys that go into the Pentagon, I know good guys that have gone in there in key positions trying to do the right things. A guy like, the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Matt Lohmeyer, good guy, right? Trying to do the right things. The problem is they only have a few months to really implement a lot of change when they first get there. And then they're isolated and insulated and just going to meetings all day, trying to keep the trains running on time and do a good job. And trying to reform and radically change things becomes very, very difficult. So that's one of the realities we have to have as well. So that's why, I want to see radical change. That's why I say fire the generals, hold real war games, really prioritize operators and war fighters, cut the fat, and then rebuild. And we could do that. We could do that well, but it takes a lot of willpower, and you can't have a revolving door with industry if that's ever going to happen.
I want to just real quick, I want to address what both of you guys said, but we do have to hit one final sponsor here before the show ends. And then I'll address that, and then we'll go around the horn, get some closing thoughts here. So on that note, guys, quick question. How much control do you guys actually have over your money right now? Technology has changed everything, and now it's changing how money works. Crypto has started a niche, but now it's going mainstream. Faster payments, more control, fewer middlemen. It's not hype. It's just kind of where things are going. And getting started today is easier than you think. That's where Rumble Wallet comes in. Rumble Wallet, you can buy Bitcoin, you can hold dollar-backed stable coins, you can even own digital gold backed by real gold, all in one place. Setup is simple. It connects with MoonPay, so you can use your debit card, credit card, or your bank account and be up and running in just minutes. It's not about the amount. It's about getting in early and understanding what's coming next. And once you're set up, you can even tip your favorite Rumble creators like us directly. So do this now. You can scan the QR code or click the link in the description and download the Rumble wallet. And from there, you can set up your wallet. You can tap buy, and then boom, you're in the game. Take control of your money and get started with Rumble Wallet today. The thing I would like to add to this is, so Alpha, let me just ask you. I'm not going to try and go too hard on our guest tonight. How much do you think China spends a year on national defense?
I have no idea.
Take a guess.
A year?
A year.
I mean, they're huge. I would say what?
They're way bigger than we are. They have their population is in the billions.
And that's what I'm saying. So I would say their military budget a year has to be what, at least $500 billion?
What do you think Russia spends a year on their military budget?
I think it's less than China. They're probably what, maybe a quarter of that.
So 200 billion, 150 billion?
About 250 billion.
So China's last 2025 is estimated at 336 billion. So about half, a little over half of what you projected. And Russia's is about 190 billion. Now, before the Ukraine war, Russia's was 75 billion. Before the Ukraine war, obviously they kicked it up. So like my point is how do we justify, when we're $40 trillion in debt, how do we justify spending 5 times our two biggest adversaries, we're told, China and Russia? How do we justify spending 3 times more than both of them combined?
Well, I think a lot goes into play in that, because it's not just that simple. You got to look at the Biden administration, but even before the Biden administration, you got to go to the 8 years of Obama. And we have a lot of military equipment that was created subpar on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're talking about, you got to go and we got to bring that shit up to speed. We also got to make sure we don't fall behind in the technology race with these guys. And we got to make sure that, our guys are volunteers. We got to make sure that they are taken care of, which we've massively failed, just given the conversation we had tonight. But those things all need to get rectified. And we also have that part of the military, is that those dark budgets, right? We know that there are good guys out there doing shit that's never going to meet the headlines. And that doesn't come at a cheap price. And a lot of that money that's in there that's going to say it's paid for this, we know it's not paid for that. It's going to go into that stuff.
Well, according to General Flynn, that dark money is a completely separate budget from this 1.5. Well, not necessarily this 1.5, but from the line item defense budget. It's
that's what I'm saying. It's that we might be saying we're sending money because we're doing some operations out in freaking New Guinea, right? So it's listed under that budget, but it's going to make its way through the apparatus to get into that budget that he's talking about. But the other thing too is I would like to know is, if they have this kind of budget and we look at military readiness over the next decade, what do those future budgets look like if you're given what you need today? And if it's something like, well, no, we always need this to sustain it, well, then a conversation needs to be had. But if we realize that, hey, let's remove all the waste. And if we remove all the waste, well, then does that budget come down? Because we know that budget is including waste, because that's the way it's always operated too. So it's complicated.
Davis, I will let you respond if you wanted to call me a libertarian retard.
No, listen, I think you're right. I think we have to ask the question about that budget. But, here's the biggest question I would ask, and maybe it's controversial as well, but can we even defend our own border? We're spending all of that money on national defense. Can we even defend our own border? I'm not convinced that we can. So I have huge questions about what our priorities are when it comes to military spending from that piece alone. But again, we have to be putting it into war fighters, into bullets, into guns, into technology. There's so much waste there, but why are we spending that kind of money if we can't even secure our own borders?
Do you think we're destined to get out of NATO?
Yes, and I hope we do.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well,
we can be friends. We can be friends.
To the point Davis made and a comment you've made before, Brian, is, I do believe we need troops abroad, not as much as we do, but we do need some. But why are we deploying units to our southern border? We should have a fixed military that operates at our border 24/7, a group that knows that region. That's where they train. Their equipment's for that. It's, I'd 100%. And don't stop at the southern border.
Here's the other question. I'll ask Davis this because I've already asked you this on air. Davis, how many bases do you think China has around the world? Do you know? First, I should say, do you know how many the U.S. has?
A lot.
Upwards.
I don't know what that numbers is.
Upwards of 750. So, given the U.S. has 750, how many do you think China has? And it'll be the same question for Russia.
It would not surprise me at all if it was less than 100.
Hold on. I'm gonna make sure I'm fact checked.
Well, we also got to remember not every base that's counted is a full-blown base either.
So China has one confirmed military base outside of China, and that's in Cambodia. Russia has less than 20. Wow. And they say maybe 29 to 35, depending on how you define base. Wow. And we have 750. And we're spending $1.5 trillion on our defense. Against who? Against who? I mean, when Independence Day happens and the aliens come down here, everybody better be paying America back for the $40 trillion in debt that we are for this crazy defense spending. But I mean, this is what Eisenhower warned us of. And, to your point you made about that, Eisenhower warned us about this, but he perpetuated it. He enabled it during his presidency. Same as Truman. When Truman signed off on the CIA, he was naive in signing off on that. And what did he say on his deathbed when he was done? My biggest regret was turning the OSS into the CIA. I never should have done that. And Eisenhower did the same thing. And so, hindsight's always 20/20, but damn. All right, let's go around the horn. We're over time. Give final thoughts. Davis, I will start with you. Plug whatever you'd like. Also tell people where they can go to watch oh my goodness, why can't I think of it? Disobey.
Listen. Duty to Disobey. It's going to be in over 100 theaters nationwide. Kind of all regions are going to have a place to go watch it. It's really important to go out. Tomorrow is the last day in a lot of locations to buy tickets to actually see it in the theater. It's put out by Children's Self-Defense, but it really is important to get the story out there. We're trying to get it shown in the Congressional Visitor Center in DC. So we're working hard on that. There's a lot of pushback on that, as you can imagine, but dutytodisobey.com, Children's Self-Defense is putting that out. That's the place to go and look for a theater in your area. Go and watch it. There's going to be a lot of theaters where there's going to be people that were in the movie or people of conscience that are actually going to be hosting events, roundtable discussions, and things like that. So it's a great opportunity to get out and support the veterans in your area.
All right. Alpha, final thoughts?
Yeah, as far as our budget, it's better to have it, not need it, not have it. And I just want to remind everybody, we are 4 minutes past the marker, and CannCon ain't crying like he was this morning when I was talking.
I don't, because the next show
just want to remind everybody that he was trying to protect mass.
The next show is not on Rumble Studio, so I don't have that issue here. And also, the next show is Chris Paul and Burning Bright, and not John, the boss. And you got to make sure the boss is happy at all times. Also, you were giving
us a Massey hat. I'm gonna buy you a Massey hat.
That is so fetch.
literally being a teenage girl in high school.
I'm gonna buy you one of the shirts, the Massey's Nasties. I'm gonna get you one.
So, when I was doing my research today, Alpha, I asked Grok, I said, how many times has Alpha Warrior X posted about Massey in the last 5 days? 10 posts, bro. Relax,
I'm dropping the ball. I need to get with it.
Yeah, you are dropping the ball. I've had 0.
Yeah, you're really dropping the ball. I got one that's sitting in the chamber right now. I got to go
So the audience doesn't know that Davis was subject to this debate that me and him had before the show began. As I'm sitting here trying to get our guests prepared for the show, Alpha's like, Massey this and Pandora's box. And I'm like, bro, you are like
came from my president, man. Came from my president.
You are a schoolgirl. Flo Delisle said, thank you, Can. Back in the day, we spent so much money to figure out how to spell in space, but someone figured out an H2 list, only 5 cents. That's a Rumble rant there. So thank you for that. Davis, thank you so much for joining us. Real quick, plug your X one more time, at Davis Younts.
That's it. Yep. At Davis Younts.
All right. Alpha, I don't know what to do with you, man. I'm gonna go watch your show, and I'm gonna tune into your show tonight, and I'm gonna listen to you do a 2-hour show about fucking gossip, bro. I love you, man.
We're not even going to mention Massey on that show. This is not a political show. It's conspiracies, and
it's a gossip show.
No, not the show we're doing tonight. It's Overwatch
not a gossip show.
No.
Oh. Well, this is all gossip.
No,
Davis, thanks again for joining us, sir. We appreciate you being here. God bless, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.